Good evening, members. Please remain upstanding while the chaplain addresses you.
I want to just speak for a few minutes about integrity. As you may have gathered from our scripture reading, which was from the Old Testament, Job was a rich man, faithful to God, who is put to the test by the devil in an attempt to show that Job is only faithful to God because he has been blessed by God. In other words, that there was something in it for him. Despite suffering many reversals of fortunes, Job maintains his integrity by remaining loyal to God, who ultimately restores Job's fortunes. So how do we in the 21st century maintain our integrity? And what is integrity? The Cambridge Dictionary defines integrity as the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles that you refuse to change. And I believe that we are living in a world where we are not seeing a lot of integrity at present. We are seeing allies working with potential enemies and abandoning friends who are in need. We are seeing deceit in everyday lives with an equal treatment of people around the world. And I am sure that everyone here can identify similar examples of how we seem to live in a world that lacks integrity. We can all promise the earth when we are trying to achieve something, but the story somehow becomes very different when we have achieved our aim. That is not showing integrity and puts trust in us and our organizations at risk. So I would ask that as you prepare to debate the items on your agenda this evening, just ask yourselves whether you are approaching it with your personal integrity intact. So let us pray. And this evening, having just heard that the Mayoress has been taken to hospital, I would ask our prayers for the Mayoress and as we pray for this Borough Council meeting. Heavenly Father, as we gather in this Borough Council meeting, we humbly ask for your guidance and wisdom in all our deliberations. May your light illuminate our path, leading us to decisions that honour your will and serve the best interests of our community. Enable all here to maintain respect for one another and to maintain their integrity in this meeting. Amen.
Thanks so much, Padre. And hopefully the other members are going to come in, or Tony, you're going to go and get them. Are we ready, members? The assumption is you've all signed in with your voting card. So the first item of business on the agenda tonight will be apologies. Councillor Harvey, got any apologies?
Beyond those on the order paper, Mr Mayor, I've got Councillor Connor and Councillor Ashfield.
Thank you. Councillor Gavin James?
Yes, apologies for Councillor Chatburn. Councillor Konietzko is on his way and he'll be here as soon as he's released by South Western
Thank you
Trains.
very much. Councillor Monisbone?
Mr Mayor, Deputy Mayor, I've got Councillor Eaches, which you've got Councillor Ganesh, Councillor Perry, Councillor Court and Councillor Miller.
Thank you very much. And Councillor West?
I got apologies from Councillor Ibrahim, Councillor Tustain and Councillor Lee, with others possibly on the way.
Thank you very much. So, members, I've got to read this declaration of interest note. Members, please note that as regards item 9 on the agenda, local government reorganisation, the monitoring officer has considered the position in respect of disclosable pecuniary interest in relation to council allowances for all elected members, and particularly those on the county council. Having carefully considered the nature of the interest and the matter for discussion this evening, the monitoring officer thinks it would be appropriate in all circumstances to issue a dispensation to allow those members also elected to the county council to contribute and vote on the item. All other elected members of this council do not have a DPI in respect of their Basingstoke councillor allowance, and as such do not need a dispensation. Are there any declarations of interest this evening?
I am also a county councillor, as per my records.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor James. Yeah, Councillor, I think we had a dispensation anyway. You don't really need to, that's why we had the dispensation. Item 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of February. I'll move that the minutes are correct record, but do we need a seconder, and that is Councillor Harvey. Are we all in favour? Okay, I'll sign the minutes later on. There are none. Item 5, questions from members of the public. We've received one question from the member from the public. Mr Sanders, you have 2 minutes to ask your question.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Good evening, everybody. It's quite a long question, so I don't propose, for the interest of time, to read the whole thing out. I just go straight to the key points, if I may, that I would like some clarification from the leader on. A substantial part of this council's income is from the return made on its investments, which has enabled us to have one of the lowest district council taxes in the country. In the new unitary world, will that income now have to be spread evenly across the whole unitary area, reducing the amount of that will be accrued just for the residents of Basingstoke-on-Deane? And what will be the impact on Basingstoke-on-Deane residents? Will we be required to pay in council tax? And similarly, over many years, astute management of the assets of this council have enabled us to fund and improve services through income and acquisitions and disposals. Presumably, ownership of these assets will also be shared with our neighbouring council areas. So how much will this reduce the income residents might have expected to be available for Basingstoke-on-Deane in the future? Responsibility for adult social care, children's services, highways and a lot of other services will be transferred from HCC to the new unitary. What is the balance between the income to be transferred from HCC and the costs to be incurred? And how are they going to be calculated, and who is going to do the calculation? Are we taking on any unfunded liabilities? And are there any liabilities hidden in the current accounts or balance sheets of the councils that we were joining with, and the functions transferred from HCC that could have a significant effect on the financial viability of local government in our area? Are there any black holes? So many people love black holes these days. Are there any black holes that exist now or may be created by reorganisation? And I go on, if I can turn the page. There are many other questions based upon hard, factual and detailed financial analysis that need to be answered before we as local residents, not you as councillors, but you as councillors as well, we as local residents can take a view on whether any proposed reorganisation, though possibly supportable in principle...
Can you
is
sum up now,
actually-
Mr Saunders, please?
Sorry? Yes, it's actually good for us. So in putting forward your recommendations, what are the red lines the administration will lay down against which they will determine whether the final proposal continues to be a benefit to the residents of this borough, whose interests they are currently there to safeguard? Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you very much for the brevity of that one. Councillor Harvey, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and welcome back, Clive. It's good to see you. Just for the benefit of everybody in the room, Gavin, Clive and I and a number of others in this room go back a number of years, and Clive is a former leader of the council, so it's good to see you here, Clive. Clive, you mentioned 2016 in your question, and I think that's no surprise that the county appeared to be dusting off the old playbook when it comes to this debate about devolution and local government reorganisation. And in fact, the conversation we just had before we started the meeting reflected our joint memories of having gone through something like this recently with the County Council. The paper this evening reflects the essential position thus far. Now, firstly, the 15 leaders have been discussing in a series of meetings whether an agreed position was possible, and a set of principles emerged from those meetings. That was until the 12th of March, when the County Council published their council meeting report. Before that, these principles were the only such principles being discussed. We had made our position very, very clear throughout all of those meetings that we believed a full mainland unitary option was preferable, and that North Hampshire was a natural economic geography for one of those four councils. The paper this evening sets out the agreed principles amongst those other councils, and also sets out our position on the four mainland council preference, and specifically referencing a North Hampshire council. Now, the timetable, the criteria that any proposals will be assessed against, and the process we all have to follow has been set down by government. Government have been clear that this is happening across all 21 county areas in the country. So you're right, Clive. The County Council has thought itself very clever to have published its report on the 12th of March, and you used the word Putinesque in your question. An interesting word, to say the least, given what's going on. Now, I'm going to make a leap of faith, Clive, that we haven't always seen eye to eye, but you and I, on this occasion, I think, and I'm going to assume, unless you prove me wrong, are actually motivated, and we are allies, I think, in this debate, which is that the interests of the residents of Basingstoke and Deane are our first and primary responsibility. So in a process that we've not instigated, where we will be done too if we do not take the initiative and shape the field ourselves, and working constructively with our partners in Hart and Rushmore for the North Hampshire Council that is in our residents' interests, particularly given the alternative that County are now proposing. You astutely identified in the question the challenges of the process. You are right that much of the detail remains to be worked through, but the best indications, despite County's manipulation of the data, is that the natural geography of North Hampshire has a clear identity which will support growth and services relevant to our residents. The size works. There is no getting away from the financial implications, as you rightly point out. Taking on social care is a risk. It's a risk to carry on with the county council that's going bust. There are examples of councils across the country, smaller unitary councils, that are successful, well run and deliver good services. So how we manage our assets will apply across the whole of North Hampshire, because the approach that you speak of, the approach that we've taken over many, many years, also applies and will apply to a significantly bigger asset base. The questions you ask are the same ones that we're working through diligently with our officer team. And there are more besides. There are more questions besides those that you've already posed to us. It's that hard, detailed, factual analysis to come that will underpin the principal position, because we will now, if we go forward this evening, as Cabinet did on Tuesday night, agree to do, develop a full, worked-up business case that will involve that detailed, considerable analysis. And we will require and need the County Council to share its data fully, openly and transparently, and we expect them to, in order that they can facilitate the process that we need to go through to answer the questions that you've rightly asked. So the full submission will be in September. It will contain a fully worked up financial case with evidence to support it, and that is something we will be working on and sharing as we go through. And that's, I think, an important point, that we work in partnership with yourselves, with others, parishes and our public and private sectors. Now, there are some red lines, and I think a few of these could be, and these are some markers I think we might want to consider, at least we do. We always want to work in what is first and foremost in our residents' best interests, number one. Number two, we hope tonight that we will say no to a county-wide unitary and yes to a North Hampshire council based on Hart, Rushmore and Basingstoke and Deane coming together. Three, I think we should be clear that new services will need to be designed and they will involve service transformation. There will be a new approach that we can bring to this agenda, something I know you worked on, others have worked on, back in 2016 when you were fighting the fight, and we will carry on fighting the fight right here, right now. That any council must maintain the local connection to our communities. That is an absolute essential priority. And finally, that the natural economic geography for Basingstoke and Deane looks northwards up the M3 corridor, which I think is a very important point. So there is an awful lot more to what you've raised tonight, Clive. I hope I tried to address at least some of the questions as far as we've got thus far, but I can assure you what you said we take seriously, and that work will be done as part of the process, because we will be submitting something to government that stands up to scrutiny and works. We are going to win this battle for our residents.
Thanks very much, Councillor Harvey. Mr Sanders, do you have a supplementary question?
I do, Mr Deputy Mayor. Where I have a slight problem is that the government white paper on local government reorganisation clearly recommends a minimum size of 500,000 for population for a unitary authority. And this was largely based upon the PwC report of 2020, which we all know and love. That report has now been updated at the beginning of March, and it shows that, if anything, 500,000 is an absolute minimum if you're not going to incur extended periods of payback, which may never happen, and an underlying ongoing increase in costs for the boroughs or the areas in which you're operating. Therefore, that comes back to us, the taxpayer, to pay for. So could the leader therefore explain why he's recommending already to council that we form part of of one of 4 new unitaries with a population that barely reaches 400,000, which will inevitably lead to an increase in costs to the taxpayer, and where one of our partners that we're joining with is on the verge of bankruptcy? Would it not be better to include Winchester and Andover in the new unitary area, both of which are actually closer to Basingstoke than I am where I live and inside the borough? So talking about being part of the locality is an important aspect of that. Therefore, can I suggest that instead of just looking at the 4 option, you don't tie yourself back yourselves into a corner. You look at the 3 option as well as the 4 option, and which gets you to 650,000, and it gives us much greater long-term financial security. And I would ask you to think about that when you debate later on the fact that at the moment, as it stands, you're asking the council to throw away one possible option, which may ultimately be thrown out by government by not being financially viable.
Thanks very much, Mr Sanders. Very good to see you back in the chamber. Councillor Harvey, do you want to respond to the supplementary?
I do. I'm sorry, Clive, but we're going to diverge on this one. This is where we will split up in years, I'm afraid. And you won't be surprised. I mean, the PwC report is a flawed piece of work to begin with. It was developed by the County Councils Network with a very specific job, which was to save the county councils. It didn't look at the problems around transformation. It hasn't looked at service reform. It has looked at what it can do to make the case to save the county councils around the country. That is not the way to approach this issue. I think the population figure of 500,000 has been a complete red herring because it's changed every 5 minutes. The position, as we now know clearly, as of last week, from Jing McMahon, the local government minister, speaking at the District Council's network conference, is that councils of 350,000 in population are perfectly acceptable. And in fact, there are many examples of many councils around the country that are less than 500,000 in population that run perfectly successful unitary authorities. More so than that, actually. Those authorities are some of the leading authorities in the country. 500,000 would still put many of those unitaries in the top bracket for being the largest councils in the country. I think it's in the residents of Basingstoke and Dean's interest to be part of an authority where we are involved directly with the services, the provisions of change and transformation we can make in children's services and adult social care, the things that we can achieve together that many of our residents have been crying out for many, many years, that by working with Hart and Rushmore and working with Basingstoke and Dean as we are, we will be far more successful. I don't agree in terms of the geography, and it's important that we do state our position. The whole point of this debate is that the County Council is very clear on what it wants. It wants to do away with the districts and to create a super county unitary. They are not mixing their words, and nor should we. And that's why a full mainland unitary option that involves the two cities and actually splitting up the rest of Hampshire and North Hampshire leading the way in the way that we want to is incredibly important. So I respect what you're saying, but I disagree. And in terms of the tactics and what we need to do to protect our residents' best interests, I think we're very clear. And we've been very clear by making it in this report clear where we stand, by publishing it publicly. Also with saying our partners are on board with us, which I think is important actually. Significant numbers of partners are on board, both public and private sector, in the business community and in our public sector, that a North Hampshire authority in fact makes perfect sense to them. And the service transformation we can talk about will make a difference to our residents. So the work we've done thus far has been endorsed by those communities.
Thanks very much. We now move on to item 6 on the agenda. Petitions. There are no petitions that I'm aware of tonight, so we'll move on to item 7, which is resignations and appointments. Group leaders, are there any changes to committee seats? That's good. Are there any nominations to fill the vacancies on the outside bodies listed in the agenda? Councillor McCormick.
Mr Mayor, this is Deputy Mayor. If I may, I'd like to put myself forward for the North Hampshire Area Road Safety Council, as there are 2 vacancies on there. I'd like to fill one of them.
Do you need a seconder, Councillor McCormick? Councillor Jones is seconded. All in favour? Any other nominations before we finish that item? No. The item 8, the pay policy statement. Do the officers have to leave the chamber? Go on then. You're staying, Sarah. What we're doing here is moving the recommendation from the Human Resources Committee held on the 3rd of March to approve the pay policy statement for 2025-2026. It's my duty to move this from the chair. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Harvey. Is anybody want to debate this item before we go to a vote? All in favour? Agreed. Right, I think we got the next one is the big issue of the night, item 9, local government reorganisation. Firstly, we need to move, they need a motion to suspend standing orders, if that's okay with everybody, because this is very similar to a budget debate. There'll be no time limits. So effectively, I need a proposer to suspend standing orders. Councillor Harvey, seconder. Councillor McCormick, all in favour?
Agree.
Okay. So, Councillor Harvey, you're first listed to make a speech.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Do you know what? For half a century, Basingstoke and Dean has stood as a beacon of excellence in local government, consistently delivering services that not only meet but exceed the expectations of our residents. For years we have punched above our weight as no mere district. I said in my budget speech that as an administration we've been diligently working through and solving many major issues that our residents care about. We've also been setting out a bold vision for the future of our communities, for our town and for our whole borough. Now we're seeing that bold vision begin to deliver results, with record levels of inward investment under discussion and major projects taking shape that would truly transform people's lives in Basingstoke and Deane. We are just at the beginning of the journey we want to take our borough on. So the change we debate tonight needs to embrace that agenda. It needs to step up to the challenge of delivering success for our residents. The government have decided that it intends to radically change local government. I think it's crucial that we have a say in how that change affects us. And I want to be clear, this isn't just about council structures. It's about the future of our communities, our services and our way of life. This is an opportunity to transform what the whole of local government can do for our residents and communities. So we imagine better and we want more for our communities. That's the point of this debate, the reason that we're here, to ensure that our residents' voices are heard and that the decision that the government will ultimately make is in their best interests. As a successful council, delivering high quality services, there are those that will understandably say, why is this change happening at all? Ultimately, that is a question that only the government can answer. But now that the government have let the genie of reorganisation out of the bottle, there are those based at County Hall in Winchester who would seek to absorb Basingstoke and our borough, indeed all boroughs and districts, into larger Hampshire-wide unitary authorities dominated by the remnants of the County Council. Now, County met today, and their report talks about the County Council as if it was the paragon of delivering the only services that matter to residents. They arrogantly claim that they are the only council with the experience who can determine the future of children and adult services. Now, County are arguing for a council that would be bigger than Birmingham. That's not local government, it's not reorganisation, and it's not devolution. The timetable, the criteria that any proposals will be assessed against, and the process we all have to follow has been set down by government. Government have been clear that this is happening across 21 county areas throughout the country. So we need to be bold, positive about maintaining and promoting 4 mainland new councils, because it's the right option and it will deliver something much better for our residents. Now, the Isle of Wight is a special case, and it will be treated in the process as a special case. The 15 councils across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight have met, many times in fact, over recent weeks, seeking to reach a consensus. A set of principles have been agreed, and that forms part of the paper set out before you tonight. That is as far as those conversations could get thus far in the process. But this is important, because while those 15 leaders were meeting together in good faith, behind our backs, the County Council had commissioned PwC in secret to work up the county's now published paper and develop their own set of principles beyond those principles that had already been agreed amongst the 15 member authorities. And this is while they were negotiating a shared set of guiding principles with us. So what they said to our faces in those meetings was not what they were then doing themselves. And this is the point. The caustic county culture needs to be replaced with something new, something fresh, something better, something positive. We need to transform local government and improve the services residents receive. We need to step up to the challenge of change. And that's something the county can't do, because they wish to continue as they are by simply bolting on the district's responsibilities and services. That's not going to achieve change the government are looking for. It won't deliver better children's or adult services. It'll simply kick the can down the road of an already dysfunctional council a few more years. Now, one of the many reasons Hampshire is in a dire financial position is because it froze its council tax and took that millions of council tax out of its tax base forever. This year, they are over £216 million in deficit. They're predicting next year to be £266 million in deficit, a figure that's only going to rise. It's not all their own fault, but a large part of it's down to the intransigence of county to transform, to change. So they're not the example we should be following. There are plenty of much smaller unitary councils around the country who are viable, delivering quality services to residents. So Hampshire's arguments simply don't stack up. the biggest is not better. Financial competence comes from good management. It doesn't come from size. A smaller, more focused unitary council will be more responsive to local needs and better able to maintain our community's unique character. The 4 unitary model for mainland Hampshire that we're proposing, with an average size of 500,000, will still create organisations large enough to do everything they need to really well and to be financially sustainable, but crucially, they will be connected to the communities they serve. They will be bigger than all the existing London boroughs by population and similar in size to existing successful unitaries such as Manchester City Council and Wiltshire Council. So our paper sets out the agreed principles of the 15 authorities in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. But we were right to go further in our report. We openly set out our position for discussion with government, and all 14 other councils know where we stand because we've been upfront about it. Basingstoke and Deanhart and Rushmore form a natural economic geography in North Hampshire. We share economic ties. We look northward along the M3 corridor. This option for North Hampshire is supported by some of our largest local businesses, the Chamber of Commerce, the Small Business Federation, and many of our key public sector partners. We've met with these partners and they like that North Hampshire Council could offer the opportunity to deliver new jobs, new investment, because we have such a powerful opportunity with our economy to meet the needs of our residents. North Hampshire works, and we have a shared vision and aspiration of our future. Let's not forget, if these 3 councils combined come together, they would still be one of the largest unitary councils in the country, and within the top 10% largest by population out of 125 other unitary councils in the country. Last year, our local GVA growth put us in the same company as Cambridge, Oxford and the City of Manchester. North Hampshire is consistently considered one of the best places to live in the country. So think about this. Think about the opportunity of designing a new children's service for our residents, tailored children's services to address issues like special educational needs and disabilities. Think about partnerships in education and with colleges where we can create that unlock the talent and potential of our young people. We'd have autonomy over highways to align with our local priorities. Think about potentially improving the infrastructure we hold, like potholes. Yes, we'll inherit an awful lot of roads and an awful lot of potholes. You know, the ones that Hampshire County Council are not maintaining at the moment. But we would have the ability to improve things. We will deliver shared services now with Hart. We already share services with our partner councils. We might be delivering co-produced services with some of these new unitary councils. We would be able to design new co-produced services with our health partners in public health and primary care. Our North Hampshire Council would be innovative, focused on new service models and transformation. We want our talented officers to break the mould and deliver the change that residents need. Government needs to hear us too. It's time to deliver the hospital, because we can't grow as they want us to or to meet this radical agenda without that kind of investment in our community's future. The social care sector, we all know, is in crisis, and without a national solution, any new council of any size will struggle to manage the costs of this long term without major change. That's one of the reasons Hampshire are in a crisis now and why they don't have the answers. We need to advocate strongly for a national care service or for social care to be genuinely integrated into the NHS and then work with local government and wider public services. That is the solution to that crucial problem. So the transition to a new council will require an awful lot of hard work, and it's going to involve a lot of commitment from us all. We all have a role to play. We all have a role to play in emphasising that this decision is not one to be taken lightly. It's a once-in-a-generation opportunity to change our future, and we've got to get it right, as has already been said this evening. So we need to move forward at pace, with certainty, in order that we do protect our interests. Back in 1974, 50 years ago, that was when the last major change took place in local government that created the two-tier system in the first place. This is as radical a change. The work we do in the next few years is going to set the position for decades to come. So let's be absolutely clear to the people across North Hampshire. We're talking about advocating for 4 mainland councils which would deliver all of their services. We're making the case for Basingstoke and Deane to join with Hart and Rushmore to form a North Hampshire Unitary Council. It's absolutely essential that the democratic connection to our communities is maintained as a priority. I believe the borough wards with 3 members are best, not county divisions, that we need to keep councillors as close to communities as possible and in numbers that mean representation is meaningful. That sense of place is as important as value for money. So I say to the government, we want a genuine partnership. We want to seize the opportunities for North Hampshire to thrive under a unitary authority. We'll lever the economic strength. We will deliver quality of life and community collaboration, ensuring our residents feel empowered and hopeful for the future. We need to be the masters of our own destiny in this and shape the future. I commend the paper to you tonight.
Thanks so much, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Midas Bain, do you want to make your speech?
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Mayor. I think we're going to have tonight, and we're going to hear all sorts of agreements. And I think that the starting point for me is actually to accept that we are at a crossroads. A crossroads for local government in Hampshire that I would say we have never seen before. It isn't like what happened 50 years ago. But, as Councillor Harvey says, this reorganisation is being forced upon us by central government. And therefore we must be clear about what that means and what it does not mean. We cannot shy away from the very real concerns raised by residents, raised by communities, parish councils, businesses, neighbourhood planning groups, charities, and our public service partners, whether that be the police, the NHS, and our local colleges. First and foremost, we must be really clear and honest about the cost of transition, a cost that central government say they will not fund, likely, as we see in the paper, to exceed over £20 million, along with a broken funding model for adult social care and children's services. These are fundamental issues that affect the lives of our most vulnerable residents today. We cannot allow reorganisation to make these problems worse tomorrow. Then there's the issues of housing. Communities are rightly concerned about where thousands of new homes will go, especially when they hear recently that their input into planning decisions is slowly being stripped away. Neighbourhood planning groups, parish councils, who have all worked tirelessly to shape their local areas, fear they are being left with even less of a say than they have ever had. Businesses too are worried. They are already struggling with rising costs, higher taxes, inflation, and supply chain pressures. They need stability and support, not uncertainty over how a new council will impact them and whether our support will change. We must ensure that any changes help businesses thrive rather than add to their current burdens. Community and charitable organisations which have long benefited from the support from Basingstoke and Deane Borough Council now question what the future holds. Will they still receive the backing they need to keep supporting our residents? The same goes for sports and cultural organisations. They are an integral part to the fabric of our communities, yet they too are uncertain. Where they stand, what will they get, who will support them, and does this new system help? Despite all of this, we cannot sit back and let others decide the future for us. That is why I support this paper, because stepping into the driving seat is the only option. There is no other. If we are to do everything in our power to protect our residents, our economy, and the thriving ecosystem we have built over decades with different administrations. North Hampshire is not just a beautiful part of the country, it is a very major contributor to the regional and national economy. If we don't act, we risk losing control over what we have worked so hard to create. But we must also have our eye on the ball. Residents will never forgive us if we create something that is unworkable. Let me be absolutely clear. Residents do not want a bloated council chamber with 120 councillors. They simply would go, what on earth is that about? We need lean, effective governance, not unnecessary bureaucracy, but that will be a key challenge, as frontline councillors need to be able to, as the Minister says, get stuff done. We must fight to keep council tax low. The pressures of harmonisation will push it up, and we cannot allow that to happen unchecked. Services must remain focused on those who really rely on them most. We are here to serve our residents, not any system. At the same time, while devolution and a mayor for Hampshire and the Isle of Wight offer many opportunities, we must ensure that what we create truly works for our residents. A mayor focused on health, transport and economic growth, as well as many other things. Residents tell us every day, bigger is not always better. And we must resist any temptation to centralise for the sake of it. We must not only demonstrate our commitment to protecting Basingstoke, but also Tadley, Overton, Whitchurch, Old Basing, Kingsclere, Sherburn, St John, and all of our villages. But we must also be clear that this is about North Hampshire. We now need to start thinking about Farnborough, Aldershot, Fleet, Yateley, North Camp, Hartley Whitney, Church Crookham, Hook, and every community in what will be our new patch. They must be at the heart of our future plans. No town or village should feel left behind, and that will not be an easy thing to achieve. But now let's also be frank about acknowledging the realities of the boundaries of the jigsaw pieces that we are given. If we were starting from scratch, as we've heard from Clive, and had complete freedom, we might make different choices. We know that Aldershot and Farnborough have strong connections to the west of Surrey, just as Basingstoke arguably has more in common with parts of the Thames Valley. And to answer Clive's question directly, I recognise that Andover may look towards Basingstoke. I'm not sure about Winchester. I was going to make a joke that would be really inappropriate, but I'm not going to. But this is not a blank slate. And the ministerial team have made it absolutely clear about the process and indeed have tracked back on the 500k. I have heard that directly from the Minister's voice on 3 different occasions so far in the last, I think, 6 weeks. The reality is that we do not have the luxury of endless debate about what would be ideal. We have a reorganisation being forced upon us, and we must work with the framework that we have been given. So, Mr. Deputy Mayor, what must we do? My suggestion is that we collectively commit not just to these principles, to work much harder with, again, a regularly used phrase recently, the coalition of the willing across the county. We must deliver what the Minister originally asked for, which is not this document, a fully developed business case that stands up to scrutiny, a clear map of boundaries so everybody knows where they are, and a strong, united voice demanding the investment we need in economic growth, transport, health and social care. I'm led to believe many local leaders across the county, when they have told me there is an overwhelming majority supporting a 4-unitary plan. In fact, I think today they wish they had gone further in the document that they have agreed. And strong determination to make this happen. And we must show that determination, and we must act now. Before the decisions are taken away from us, taken out of our hands, because no one likes to be forced to do anything, and already we have been made to feel uncomfortable with the process so far. But let's protect what we have built, fight what is best for our residents, and ensure that North Hampshire remains a place we can all still be proud of now and in the future. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks very much, Councillor Monisbane. Councillor Gavin James, would you like to make your speech?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Deputy Mayor. You'll excuse that I don't have much prepared. I spent 5 hours discussing this topic at County Council. and the level of misunderstanding and misinformation was incredible. So I will start by just correcting Councillor Harvey, where he said that Hampshire County Council have a terrible record of maintaining potholes. I think that's the problem. They have a brilliant record of maintaining potholes. It's fixing them they actually have a problem with. So, Mr Mayor, 5 hours at County Council earlier to discuss this topic. It was bizarre. Some of the comments and misunderstanding was incredible. And it's easy to see why, and it tells us why we have to do our own thing up here. Because in this council, every member has had a group briefing. Every member has probably had additional briefings from their group leader as and when they've happened. We've met the group leaders on several occasions. There's been an all-member briefing. So we all arrive here tonight with no great surprises on this paper. I am a county councillor, and during this process, I've had nothing. I've had no briefing, I've had no information, I've had no email. At the same time that you would have seen it, I saw County Council's ideas drop onto the public website saying, this is our report. No consultation with members, no discussion with members, no nothing. Which is why today it's very clear that most county councillors have no idea the difference between local government reorganisation and devolution. They asked the questions at the wrong point, and then they got very confused. Unfortunately, as we know in council chambers, you get to speak once and you can't come back. So I will, for the benefit of anyone who might be listening online, and potentially maybe Nick Adams-King's got nothing to do tonight, I will correct a few myths that came through from that county debate. First of all, Basingstoke was accused of taking over and drawing the boundaries for the whole of the county. That is not true. What we have done is we have selected what we think is the right way forward for us. We've encouraged the 4 unitary model based around the cities, which is part of the agreed principles that all members, all councils have signed up to. And we've just taken our preferred approach. Whether Fareham splits in half, what bits of the New Forest want to go where is a matter for those communities and those councils to decide. We have no interest in influencing that. We're simply making what's best for our residents and encourage them to do the same. So I wanted to correct the record on that one. The other myth is that we're trying to start a war. It was, in fact, a Basingstoke County councillor, who I won't name because the residents of Hatchwarren and Kempshot don't want to hear it, who suggested that once you draw lines, they become entrenched, and once they're entrenched, they become a battlefield, and that by drawing lines early, we're making a terrible mistake and we're starting a fight in Hampshire. That is completely untrue. This is going to be very complex. Absorbing the county services while simultaneously merging with our neighbouring authorities is going to be difficult. And all the things that Councillor Millis-Bown mentioned about protecting those services, those critical services to the most vulnerable, is really important to us and really matters to us. Getting it right is really important. So it's absolutely right, you start somewhere. You start with a view that the North Hampshire model works, it looks right. Now we can do research, we can build all that information, and we can start making plans, because ultimately we've only got 7 months to put a business case forward. I'm not sure how you can put a business case forward if the intention is to leave it till September, October before deciding what those councils' boundaries are going to look like. This doesn't mean, in relation to what former Councillor Sanders said earlier, I nearly brought you back permanently, around the connectivity with Andover. Again, Winchester's possibly will see itself as slightly separate. That doesn't mean we've ruled out all other options. It means at this stage, given the information we have from central government around the number, 500,000-ish, and the not changing boundaries, that at this stage, this seems to be the most appropriate option. As things develop, it may change, but we've got to start somewhere, and this seems to be a very good starting point. And I think, for all the reasons outlined by both Councillor Millis-Bown and Councillor Harvey, it does make a lot of sense. The second bit I want to deal with is the finances, and it's the second most important thing, which may seem a bizarre thing to say. There is a reality here. Hampshire County Council's financial issues are no secret. £216 million deficit. They expect that to grow by £50 million a year. They're in an unsustainable position. This year they wrote to government asking for additional support and also asking whether they can increase council tax by 15% in order to keep themselves going. They seem to be having a fire sale of assets, which they can then try and capitalise, just to keep propping up their reserves, which are being drained away on a regular basis. Ultimately, the 114 notice is coming, hopefully before the merger happens, so they take responsibility to put their house in order before we inherit it. My expectation is that at some point they will increase council tax by 20%, and the government will allow them to do so on the basis that that's the only way of keeping them going. So whatever we do, whatever assets we talk about, whatever we talk about reorganisation, I think the reality is, unless government suddenly come up with an awful lot of money, which isn't sounding hopeful so far, council tax will probably go up by £300, because that's what the county have got to do to stay afloat, to keep children safe and to keep older people safe. So I shouldn't concern yourself too much with the situation, because that's going to happen regardless of reorganisation. But reorganisation is an opportunity then to revisit all those services, to renew those services, to refresh those services, to see how they work better. But bringing the services that we do deliver and county services together, there are opportunities to do things better, to do lots more preventative work, to make sure that those statutory services aren't overburdened with too many cases because we've done the initial work beforehand. And I'm really excited about the opportunity to do that, to actually make lives better when they're bad, rather than waiting to solve crises, which become very expensive. And I think we can do that. I think county could have done it, but so far have been reluctant to. But the finances are the second most important point. Again, picking up on Clive Sanders' point, we are in a very fortunate position that when we do our budget every year, about half of it is funded by the revenue that flows from our asset base. Once we become a unitary, our budget is going to change from £47 million a year to about £500 million a year. So that asset base is not going to make the contribution it used to, whatever happens, because we will have a much bigger budget. So that does create a test and a pressure. But as it happens, we are already paying for the county council anyway. So that money is going to be stretched a little bit further. I should also say it's very important that we are looking to join in partnership with Hart and Rushmore to create a new North Hampshire. I think there's a sense that Basingstoke is taking over North Hampshire. That's absolutely not the case. We've met the leader of Hart, we've met the leader of Rushmore, we've had lots of conversations, talking about what our shared priorities are, what our shared visions are, because this is about coming together of three fantastic councils, all with their own needs and challenges, but also with their respective talents and benefits, and we're coming together to work together as a new North Hampshire council. And the reason that's the point, I'll go to the most important thing, not the finances. The most important thing is local government. It's the first word of local government reorganisation is the word local. A North Hampshire authority is the closest we can get to truly local within the rules set out by the government. I prefer it to be smaller. As a Liberal Democrat, I've always believed that decisions made for you should be made as close to you as possible, and you should have the maximum amount of influence over those decisions. And North Hampshire would achieve that far better than any alternative that's coming forward. Because if we don't put something forward, we'll default to the Hampshire model. Mr. Mayor, I went away last week. I went to the New Forest. Bizarrely, the chairman of Hampshire County Council, I went to his division. I didn't realise it was his division at the time. So today we sat together as fellow county councillors in a apparently local government, when last week I went to his division as a tourist. And I have to say, the New Forest, because I don't want to criticise County Council, Hampshire County. Hampshire is a beautiful county. The New Forest is a beautiful place. It's absolutely fantastic. There's a great restaurant in Lyndhurst, just as you get into the village. Fantastic, brilliant staff there. Steak was fine as well. I also went to Brockenhurst, and if you go around Brockenhurst, there's some fantastic streams, some woodlands, lots of places to run, cycle and walk, and excellent quiet and fresh air, and you can see the sky, and you can look at all the planets aligning and everything. And also Lymington. I'm a great fan of charity shops. Lymington, there's a lot of rich people around there, and what they put in the charity shop is better than I normally buy, so I go there to top up. So I'd strongly recommend a visit to the New Forest. And even if we break up away from Hampshire County Council, we come North Hampshire, I can still go to the New Forest. This is not the end of the county, it's just the end of the county council. So local is important, because when I stood there as a tourist, I would hate to be in a position where I am the decision maker about what happens in their schools. I'd never think, if I ever sit on DC for the Hampshire Combined Authority making decisions about how we build what in the New Forest, an area that I'm a tourist in, that seems absolutely wrong. So I think local is the most important thing, and local can be achieved. Everything else can be sorted out afterwards once you've established that local, because ultimately local government finance is actually quite simple. You look at what you have to provide, the statutory services, and how you can deliver them as efficiently as possible. You then look at any discretionary services you'd like to add on top of that, often to prevent people using the statutory services. You look at what funding you're going to get from government, what funding you get from your investments, and you're left with a block of money that you need, and that becomes the council tax. And I think one of the things we have to do when we get to the point of submission is making sure that government are giving us the freedom to set the council tax. Now, inevitably, and Councillor Bound alluded to the point, we'll all have a different idea about that, and that's why we're elected as local councillors. That's a debate we should be having, is about whether or not we want to pay an extra £2 a year in order to turn the street lights back on. Do we want to pay an extra £8 a year to reopen the Shore Start centres? Would we pay an extra £3 a year to save that library? Or would we rather reduce the council tax and not have those things? That's a good debate to have, and it's a debate we should be having. In this council, we have that debate. In county, they don't. In county, it's what should we cut next? And there is no debate or discussion about what we might save and choices, because there are no choices. We need to change that, and I think we can change that, because the culture of this council, the culture that we've seen in Hart, the culture we've seen in Rushmore, is a very different culture. District councils want to know what they can do for you, whereas Hampshire County Council seems to have an attitude of what can we do to you. So I welcome this paper. We should push forward. We have to be aware that if you thought the referendum was bad, I think this could be even worse in terms of the disputes and arguments that may happen. But we must rise above it all and just do what's best for our residents, and this paper is the perfect starting point to achieve that.
Thanks so much, Councillor James. Councillor West, would you like to make your speech?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just before I get onto my own remarks, just a few notes from Abdul, who was hoping to be here today. You'll see his name as co-author on the report. Councillor Ibrahim sent his apologies tonight and asked me to read some of these notes on his behalf. It's important to acknowledge the key role Basingstoke Council has played in bringing the district councils together and leading this process proactively. Special thanks must go to Russell, and particularly for his leadership in this and helping this council take a leading role in delivering the plan that we're seeing here today. Abdul has been keen for us to take the initiative rather than wait and react, and it's something that our group's really glad to have seen and glad to have this paper in front of us today. Sorry, I am very much reading this much for the first time because Abdul sent it to me just before the meeting. This approach before us today presents a strong case to government, but also resolves a long-standing issue of the inefficiencies of the two-tier system, where critical services like children's services are managed at the county level, often feeling disconnected from our local priorities. The North Hampshire Unitary Authority strikes the right balance. It would be small enough to maintain local engagement, yet large enough to sustain key services and financial sustainability. If we fail to support this direction of travel tonight, the alternative is not a better deal. It would mean we give up the ability to influence the reorganisation process, leaving Basingstoke vulnerable to being absorbed into much larger unitary structures, or of just 2 or 3 across the county. This would place decision-making even further away from our residents, mirroring the challenges we already see with Hampshire County Council. Now for my own view, and I share most of Apple's, so that's easy enough. When I knock on the doors of Winkleby residents and I speak to them, when they come to the lunch club run by my ward colleague Angie, when they speak to Alex, who they know will campaign alongside them and protest and push for things that he thinks are important and the local residents know are important to them, we hear the same story again and again and again. They're told, it can't be done, that's just how things are, whilst at this council and that council fight out whose responsibility it is and play electoral games. Whenever this story plays out, there are 3 things that I know are true. Firstly, it's true that most residents don't know, nor care, nor should they have to, whether this council in Basingstoke or that council in Winchester runs a particular service. The only thing they care about is getting the things done for their local community. Secondly, it's true that, like colleagues across this chamber, we enter local government because we want to help. We want to fix problems and resolve issues and make a difference in our communities. But far too often we hit a wall. A system that ties our hands, that keeps the real levers of change just out of reach and forces us to tell residents that we can't do anything about their problems. And thirdly, it is always true that our residents are sick of this council in Basingstoke and that council in Winchester playing ping-pong with their problems. Failing to collaborate, failing to use the levers of local government, failing to plan strategically, failing to make the best use of their council taxes, failing to make any meaningful change happen. Residents in Winkleby and across Basingstoke are sick of asking the questions and being told it can't be done. But there's also something else that is true. Local people have rejected that way of doing things time and time again. When given the opportunity, they've made it clear that they do not accept the way things are. They told us at subsequent local elections, voting for new voices and new ideas. They told us again at the general election, rejecting the politics that was holding us back. At every single opportunity, our residents are choosing change because they know that things can be better, and they demand that we make them better. Status quo is no longer an option. And whilst councillors in this chamber might feel like this is being done to them and forced upon us, it's clear to me, when I speak to residents in my ward, that the government is giving this as a gift to our residents. Whether we feel like it's being forced upon us is really not the main problem here. The county council, apologies, residents in Winkelbury and across Basingstoke have often felt ignored. The county council closed Fort Hill School despite the pleas of local residents, and right now they're proposing to cut over £4 million in road repairs while the problems of potholes continue to plague all of the roads across our community. Time and time again, they've proven themselves out of touch with the needs of our community. And I understand why. It's not their fault. They live in Winchester or Eastleigh or Fareham. The decision I hope this council takes today will have a profound impact on the local people in this community and in the communities of Hart and Aldershot and Farnborough. I believe that those communities know what's best for their area, that the people in them would do a far better job of running the services that their neighbours rely on. The people in Winchester, Fareham, Eastleigh or further afield, and when faced with local issues, local people would embrace the responsibility put on their shoulders to make change happen for their own areas. I truly believe, hand on heart, that in taking this opportunity being handed to us, we will unlock some real potential for change in this town. And that's not going to be really easy. We know that the services are going to be hard. We know that there has to be change at a national level to deliver some of these services in a way that's sustainable. But I truly believe that this opportunity is something that we've sought for a long time in various forms. We've wanted the power to say to our residents, we can get this done for you. We can fix this. Let's try together, even when these things are going to be difficult. And when they, all over the place. Tonight is the first step in change in that, and I hope you'll take it. Thank you. Giving cupid's speeches as hell.
Councillor Harvey, are you moving the report?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will move the report. There are 2 recommendations on the report, and I'd like just to move an amendment adding a third. And that third is this: that if any minor amendments to the proposed interim LGR plan are agreed by the 15 councils, that the Chief Executive, in consultation with myself as Leader of the Council, has the authority to approve the updated report on behalf of Basingstoke and Deanbury Council in order that it can be submitted tomorrow, the 21st of March, by the deadline.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor James, do you want to speak now or reserve your right?
I'm not expecting this to turn into a debate.
Sorry if I'm new to the role, but I'm opening it up for debate now. And we've got no limit on the debate. We're back to 4 minutes per speaker. Does anybody want to speak? So Isaac.
Good evening, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Nice to see you there. This council meeting marks the first time that, as councillors, we can speak, really, on behalf of our residents on the forced reorganisation of how local government here will operate in future. One that will sweep this council into the history books. It is only 6 weeks ago that this council was given any meaningful role in the proposed total transformation of local government across Hampshire. To seek agreement between 15 councils by the 21st of March is an absurd and high-handed demonstration that this is all really about central control and not localism. However, I applaud how much our Chief Executive and senior officers have been able to pull together over that time, working with and indeed playing a coordinating role with 14 other council leaderships. But it cannot be denied that we have been treated as small fry by the Labour government. Remember, it was only 3 months ago that Angela Rayner announced that her English devolution plans. Because this has been a railroaded process, what we have to consider this evening is inescapably sketchy and uncertain. We should not be surprised if in time the wheels come off the train. Rushed change usually comes unstuck. There's been no consultation with the important people, our residents, who are bemused and feel left out as well as disenfranchised. In my view, the objective of simplifying and unifying local government and removing the duplication and inefficiencies of our current two-tier system is a good one. But the way Labour is going about it is not. I'm just receiving a call now. I have to deal with that. Right. Yeah, I wonder who's calling me. Basingstoke Council stands out in terms of its financial stability and excellent delivery of services. But we are outliers in a system that is fundamentally broken. We have a county council accounting for 85% of council expenditure across Hampshire that is effectively insolvent, with an estimated deficit of £216 million. The cost of adult and children's care is escalating and is not sustainable as local government is currently funded. Yet we're being corralled by government into a process that will cause both massive organisational upheaval and huge financial deficits, at least in the short term, but where there is no certainty of government funding to help with either. Instead, defying the disruption caused to councils in their services by being merged, hoped-for efficiencies are expected to deliver the huge savings required to turn the system around. Unless we forget, we're going to be hit by a double whammy from this government. An impossible 37% increase in housing, requiring a reset of the draft local plan, with, in the meantime, the gates open for speculative, unplanned development on greenfield sites. Basingstoke's residents should therefore expect noticeably higher council taxes in future and the stripping of its assets to others who have not managed their finances as well as this council has done. As someone who shared responsibility over many years for this council's finances and helped keep them sound, as has, on the whole, the current portfolio holder, I am apprehensive about what may be decided ultimately by government that...
He's getting his voicemail there.
Yeah.
It's me, John, to say thank you.
Yeah. Don't worry. Understands and cares little about sound money management. Our residents rightly see it as their money and will be angered by the effects that losing control will have on their pockets by its squandering. This report seeks councillors' support to a 4-unitary council future, which I endorse as the best option. It is objectively correct in terms of economic and geographic cohesion and right size of population. Based on over 10 years' personal experience as a councillor, I have to say that the alternative of a HCC Mark II unitary with no borough in between will not be viewed as a good outcome.
I'm afraid the time's up.
If I know my residents well. Could you let me finish?
Well, you've had your allocated 5 minutes.
County is too big and too remote from its residents and high and mighty to be a reliable partner. So I will be endorsing this report this evening.
You don't seem 21st century on your IT stuff. Councillor
And I
Carr.
love you too.
Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Oh, right on.
No, John.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I fear it's likely that Labour's local government reorganisation will leave residents of Basingstoke and Deane worse off. Forcing our residents into a unitary council will put an upwards pressure on council tax, as our rates will regrettably, inevitably, have to rise to meet those of our neighbours. Taken with devolution, reorganisation also looks like another scheme to deprive local people of control and influence over planning and development in our area. The new mayor of Hampshire and the Isle of Wight will have strategic planning powers, the ability to bring forward strategic development plans and the power to call in. I wonder what this will mean for our genuine ability to make decisions, what it will mean for our local plan. It has not gone unnoticed that the paper before us tonight describes unitary authorities as the best way to get housing delivery. But given that creation of a mayor with those powers, I think a North Hampshire council as a defence against solent housing market pressures is essential. The question I have, of course that brings me to the paper itself, if you ignore that blip. A nebulous document that I'm afraid leaves more questions than answers. Residents deserve a roadmap, not a vague set of principles, and that will have to come, I think, before September. We need to know the direction of travel as soon as possible. And next, as mentioned, there's the question of how we will fund Labour's local government reorganisation. We've heard 20 to 30 million pounds of change costs that we will have to find locally. Clarity is needed as soon as possible about how this will be funded. This said, we must unitarise. I agree with the proposal tonight for a North Hampshire council, and it's on that basis that I'll vote for this paper. And having spoken at length to my parishes, it's pretty universal. People prefer a North Hampshire council, one that protects the unique communities we have here, our distinct economic needs and our interests. A North Hampshire authority could support our communities while ensuring that we are not lost in some enormous morass led by the South. The alternative, as I say, would place us in a vast and ungovernable blob, something stretching as far south as Petersfield, perhaps even to Lymington. That's not something where residents of Basingstoke and Deane would benefit. I fear villages in my ward of Engar would be at the back of the queue in that three-member model. But in developing North Hampshire, we have to be really clear about the size of the council we're pushing for. I think it would be a little bit absurd to push for something approaching 126 councillors, something larger than the US Senate. I think something in the order of 70 to 80 councillors will strike the right balance between representation and governance, being able to run this council properly. It's also true that a North Hampshire council has to be North Hampshire in name and deed. As has been mentioned, Hart and Rushmore councils have cultures that I think we see a lot to admire, a lot to work with, and I think I would be deeply anxious if there was any kind of Basingstoke and North Hampshire proposal. You know, this is not a greater Basingstoke model, this is genuine collaboration and partnership between the three districts. I will vote for this motion because I think the alternative of a three-unitary model would be truly disastrous for our residents. Anything larger than the Northern Three would, I think, risk the interests of our residents, though on a personal level I would love to bring Andover into the fold, but I recognise the government's parameters prevent that from happening at this stage. I view devolution with cautious optimism, but I think the path towards reorganisation is fraught with risks for our residents. And finally, between now and then, the government also need to think deeply about financial sustainability of local government in general, about the realism of the national policies that determine the shape and extent of what local councils have to deliver. And with that, thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Thanks to keep within the time limit. Councillor Vaughn.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Members will notice I've got a nice crumpled piece of paper and no reliance on IT. Okay, so the government has decided, as we've all talked about, has decided to impose local government reorganisation at a breakneck pace. And we find ourselves in a highly regrettable situation where Basingstoke and Deane Borough Council residents will be disadvantaged. They will be paying for a massive change management process, disruptive at the best of times, made worse by the pace required. They will end up with a unitary council with reduced resources and councillors swamped with the logistics of change, redirecting funding to support other priorities and deflected from tackling the issues which matter to us locally. We were led to believe that by being in the fast-track local government reorganisation group, we would have more say over the unitary structure created in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. We were advised that not being in the fast-track group risked having a structure imposed on us. The letter of the 5th of February from the MHCLG is clear. The interim LGR plan should be jointly submitted by all councils in the area, and this interim plan apparently has that support. And while I applaud the work done so far, there are many other criteria set out in the letter. For example, it says that the plan may have more than one potential proposal for the area, but it should identify the likely options for the size and boundaries of new councils with indicative costs and arrangements. There is more, a list of expectations which this interim plan spectacularly avoids answering. We have a lot of fluffy words and attached a lovely data dump, which is very interesting and informative, but it is just a data dump. Data has to be processed into proposals, and there are none in this paper. I believe this interim plan falls so short of what is required, the Cabinet is exposing us to the very real risk of the imposition of a unitary structure devised by MHCLG. I support the Cabinet's decision to advocate for a 4-unitary structure, with a North Hampshire Unitary Council comprising BDBC, Hart and Rushmore councils, but this interim plan is silent on such a structure. I am dismayed by the Cabinet's decision to submit such a substandard interim plan, which completely misses the criteria required, and I cannot support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kuznecki.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Mayor. I wanted to make a few points as part of the debate tonight. Firstly, we're not being asked for our views on the pros and cons of local government reform. The government is pressing ahead with the process of reorganising local councils regardless of what we might think or we might want. So the question isn't, do we want local government reform, but how can we make sure that local government reform works in the best interests of our residents? Which brings me on to my second point. Of all of the options that are realistically on the table, the introduction of 4 unitary authorities, with Basingstoke forming a new North Hampshire council alongside Hart and Rushmore, is the best option for Basingstoke residents as far as I can see. The other possibilities involve us being subsumed into a much larger authority where it's doubtful residents will ever get their voices heard, and I can't support that in any way. And thirdly, as we've already discussed this evening, the success of local government reform, particularly local government reform in our area, given our unique circumstances as a borough council, will depend crucially on the financial strength of this new authority that we'll have. Our guest speaker, who I think has just left, made exactly this point earlier. The paper in front of us this evening doesn't talk about the financial position of the new authority, because we don't yet know what that new authority looks like. This is a stepping stone. It is part of that process, and the financial elements will come next. And we need to fight for them. We've got a proud tradition here in this borough of providing fantastic community and public services. No other borough in our area is able to do anything similar. We are the envy of our neighbours because of that. We must ensure that our area has the resources it needs to continue to thrive. We can't let our proud traditions to be watered down by local government reform. And I know this is an objective that the administration will prioritise as the process moves forward and we begin the next phase of discussions with central government. I believe that the proposals contained in this paper represent a good start and the best way ahead in the circumstances, but there's a lot more work to do over the coming months. So I'll be supporting this paper, and I'm also committing myself to do everything I can to make sure that local government continues to be effective in our area and to secure the best possible deal for the people that we serve. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Thanks very much. Councillor Basham.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I'm also working for a phone, so please bear with me. I understand that the government is watching. There's one good thing that comes from local government reorganisation: a single council. I echo what Councillor West says. Ever since I started knocking doors to try and garner council votes, the overwhelming conclusion is that people refer to the council this, the council that. Why don't the council fix it? So they don't take the time to understand that we have a two-tier system, and why should they? They have busy lives, families, jobs. So the unification of council services under one roof, from that perspective, is to be applauded. I share sympathies with Councillor Isaac and others who have raised the words, I think, railroad. I would potentially use the word shotgun. And also I have sympathies with Councillor Isaac's view that we may be the most eligible bachelor at the dance, yet we must dance with someone. The perception of a single council means that matters like potholes, school places, special educational needs, and so on, often fall to me as a borough councillor to try and support and resolve. Of course, these are really the domain of our county council, yet experience shows us that residents regularly come to us as borough councillors for support. And here lie two important points. First, council divisions mean that one councillor represents about 13,000 people. They're simply too large to offer proper engagement and democratic representation. In our borough, we represent approximately 3,000 residents each. The second point, Hampshire County Council has, in my opinion, a significant cultural and service problem. It usually doesn't give out officer surnames or tickets numbers to track queries. Queries disappear into a public sector morass and may or may not emerge in plain English sometime later. In my opinion, it does not even engage properly with its own county councillors who struggle to get us answers. The sad fact is it's simply too large and poorly run. Ask many a resident and they will be wholly dissatisfied on roads, schools, SEND, adult social care. The conclusion for us and for the listening government is that Angela Rayner's requirement for electoral connection can only be properly served with a borough council ward quotient type structure. No mega councils here in Hampshire, please. Yet we know that we have the financial jurisprudence and stability to forge a successful unitary council in North Hampshire. Both my daughters are in the EHCP SEND process. On both occasions, we have had to file claims in the tribunal to force Hampshire to move the process to the next stage. There is no smoke without fire. So I welcome the opportunity presented by LGR, the opportunity to make decisions about local schools. How many of us would have voted to close Fort Hill? The opportunity to build a new children's services function designed with the needs of children at its core. The opportunity to have a highways department that does not change the Oak Ridge Road roundabout markings and signage 4 times in 18 months in a slow motion hokey cokey with taxpayer funds and drivers' patience. And an inability or unwillingness to tell councillors who actually made the decision in the first place, and it was attributed to lost paperwork. The dog ate my homework, sir. I could go on. It's time to grasp the LGR nettle and become properly accountable to local people for all of the council services that local people need and use. One council, one North Hampshire.
Thank you. Councillor Cubitt.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Good evening, everybody. This is not what we wanted, and this was not in the Labour Party manifesto at the last election. But it is where we are. And what I would like to say this evening is that I want to thank the leader, the co-leader, the chief executive and Rebecca for the enormous amount of work that has been going on behind the scenes. You truly have been extraordinary. You have truly gone the extra mile, and we can't thank you enough for that. If government is listening tonight, I want government to know that we will approach this as positively as possible, despite the fact we never knew this was coming, but that our residents must be front, middle and back of every single thing we do going forward. And I would like government to know that if this local government reorganisation is going to be successful, government has to sort out adult social care. It should not be a cost borne by council taxpayers. Adult social care has bankrupted county councils up and down the land. Don't let adult social care, unreformed, bankrupt Labour's newly formed unitary councils. I will be supporting the recommendations tonight. Thank you.
Councillor Harvey, do you want to sum up? I get the feeling we could go straight to a vote, but...
I think it's worth responding to a few points, if you don't mind, Mr Mayor.
Hold on, I think I've made a mistake.
That's all right.
Councillor James, would you like to speak as a seconder?
I've already spoken enough.
Don't ask him again.
Oh, sorry, did we miss you, Councillor McCoy?
Assuming that we're speaking to the main body, Hampshire opted for this, so it's not quite 100% correct that this is a forced move. Hampshire opted for this because they knew they were going to go bankrupt. They applied for a 15% hike in council tax. Angela Rayner turned them down. They could have gone for an increase in council tax, could have taken it to the people for a referendum, but they bottled it. The more they carry on, the worse the financial hole they get into. We've heard across the chamber tonight views about Hampshire, how they've failed our residents, and I'm inclined to agree, Fort Hill being the case in point. A remote, aloof council that now wants a mega council, a mega unitary council. This £500,000 size determinant, we've heard that the Minister is minded to accept proposals of below £500,000. Most of the councils are smaller than £500,000. If you look at the size rankings of councils, Birmingham is the biggest at 1.1 million. You get down to about number 18, Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole, 402,000. The new North Hampshire Council will be slightly larger than that. It will still be smaller than a lot of other councils, some of which have big problems. I'm much more inclined to go for a regional model. I see success in that in the big city regions that have got those devolved powers. I'm thinking of Manchester, I'm thinking of West Yorkshire, I'm thinking of London, and predecessor regionals like Strathclyde Regional Council in Scotland that had 2.5 million people and provided a panoply of services over a very wide geographical area, 100 miles each side, from Tobermory in the north to Stranraer in the south, and providing all sorts of public transport, including trains and ferries and even water, and water that was clean, drinkable water, not Thames Valley water in our chalk streams. So I think there's options there. I think also we do need to get adult social care out of local government. It has pushed numerous councils to bankruptcy, and the indications are that it's the more affluent areas like Hampshire and Surrey that have the biggest problems with adult social care because they have people that live longer and require more acute forms of care. It would be better done with the NHS. We've talked about it at various levels for years. We need to make it happen. Residents of Basingstoke recently voted for change. They did get change. They got new MPs. They have 3 new MPs in the new council area, none of them Tory. The Tories are currently 3rd in the opinion polls. They're busted flush. The people want change. This is change. What I've heard tonight from various quarters is a slew of negative comments resisting change, like somehow Hampshire County Council was the best way that we could have our education and our children's services, when they failed across the board. And they make decisions that are best suited for the rural areas in the south of the county, and they don't address our own particular problems. So I welcome this change. I admit, when I look at the paper, it lacks detail. But that's because we've been trying to get agreement from 15 councils, and that's been a difficult thing. But I would pay tribute to Russell and Rebecca and the leader and deputy for the role that the chief executives have played in this, coming up with something in a very short space of time. I can see the potential of this. I think we won't have that much in the way of problems with providing new education and highway services. I mean, we can't do any worse than the current county does with the potholes, let's face it.
I'm in the swimming pools.
And I think the absolutely key thing, and I appreciate I've got a minute left, is the locality. It's been mentioned tonight, oh, we can't have 120 councillors. We've got to proceed with these reforms at pace. And the reason why is because we want to respect our residents' right to vote. And if we prolong the process and they don't get to vote, they're not voting in this May's elections, I don't want to have 2 or 3 years of residents not voting in local elections. To do that, we will need to preserve the existing ward boundaries, and then at a subsequent stage, we may look at boundary reform, we may look at fewer councillors, but the absolutely key thing is that you have a local councillor that you can approach that will make decisions in your local area. There's a lot of commonality across North Hampshire, the M3, the railways, similar demographics. There's a lot for us to go for, and I commend this paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Now I believe it's you, Councillor Harvey.
I'm going to go. Okay. I want to thank everybody for the debate this evening, because I think if our residents could be, and I hope they are listening in, but I hope our residents hear us this evening, I think there is one thing that is absolutely clear. This chamber is putting Basingstoke and Dean's interests first. Listen to the speeches we've each given this evening and the care and passion that we have for our locality. And long may that stay the case. And it's also fair to say, and I really did like the comments passed, we are working in collaboration with Hart and Rushmore as partners. We are going to continue in that vein. Both leaders have been working positively with us. They are very clear of their interests, of their community's interests, and it's right that we three come together as equal partners in this process, and that's exactly how we intend to proceed, because that's the culture we are. That's the kind of council we want to be. So if we set the tone right from the beginning of the culture, that's the direction of travel. Whoever runs running the authority, I hope, will continue to go in. And it's also important, and this is really important, when talking to our business community, one of the clearest messages that came back was the ability between Farnborough, Aldershot, Herts businesses and Basingstoke and Dean's economy, the joined up strength that they feel it would give them looking up the M3 is powerful. I'm sorry, County, you're wrong. North Hampshire looks up the M3. We are clear in our direction of travel into the Thames Valley and towards London. We know where our businesses want us to invest. We know what their success, they know what it means to them to have North Hampshire as a unitary authority, and they are squarely behind it. And so is the Chamber, and so is the Small Business Federation, and I thank them for that. The other interesting point was actually having a conversation with our hospitals and our schools and colleges, and just the idea of co-producing services in the public health and primary care sector, what we might be able to do as North Hampshire, as different to what has gone on thus far, is huge. That potential is something we can tap into. Talking to our parishes, like colleagues have said, I've been out talking to parishes, and with Andy too, we've been out there having that conversation. And the feedback that comes back loud and clear is maintaining the local link. That if we go up to a North Hampshire authority, we don't lose the link to those communities. That community connection, as other colleagues have referenced this evening, is absolutely critical in both the parish and unparished parts of the North Hampshire area. And we must hold to that we maintain those links. Talking about other leaders in Hampshire, those meetings haven't been easy. Those meetings have been really difficult when you've got a county council seeking to undermine the process. When you're sat in a meeting and they're seeking to torpedo it all along because they want what they want. And that's difficult. There's going to be a break here of authorities. I'm pretty confident of that. There will be a break because there are many of us, as we've all expressed this evening, who do not agree with the direction of travel that the county council is choosing to go in. That's their choice. We say something very different. I think you've all said something very, very different this evening. I think it's also important to talk about the next stage, where this goes from here, because you've all rightly raised issues. And yes, there has been some criticism. The next stage is putting the meat on the bone of this in the financial analysis and the designing of services and the way we work this up into something that's going to actually fly in 2028. That's 3 years of a lot of hard work that our officer team and us together are going to have to do to get this thing to work. I genuinely believe this. I think we can step up to that challenge. You listen to those other voices, the head teachers, the chief executives and so on. They're up for this. And the amount of criticism they've given over what has gone in the past is another matter. I think a lot of them will be glad to see the back of the county council, if I'm being honest with you. But the truth is that's not good enough. Just having a go at county isn't good enough. We've got to come up with the answers. So that's a really important part of this next stage, and you've all got a part to play in this. We have the opportunity to shape what this will look like with our partners. So that heavy lifting is going to start coming our way, and we need to step up to that challenge and meet that head on. I would also just say finally, I think, in bringing this together, if we do this well, if we can take our residents with us on this journey, and they are a key part of this conversation that is then part of the next stage, then what we achieve will be better. I just want to plant that thought. Criticise all we like about the past. What we do now has got to be better. So what does that mean? In children's services? Yes, in adult social care, well, we still have it. What does that mean about roads and transport and planning and strategic planning? What does it mean in all of these big work streams that are going to start flowing out from this here? Without losing sight of, and this is the final point, the most important message, over the next few years, we will not take our eye off the ball of what we are doing now for our residents in Basingstoke and Dean, because they still expect us to deliver the high quality services, the economy, the jobs, the work, everything. They expect us to get on with the job now of delivering for them as their local borough council, and that's exactly what we will do. That's exactly what our focus and aspiration will be. So I commend the paper to council, and let's get on with the job.
Thanks, members. The gut feeling is we don't want a recorded vote, but does anybody want a recorded vote? Okay, we go with a recorded vote. Recorded vote.
No, I would like.
We're going to go with one.
Can I just clarify, Mr. Deputy Mayor? Does a recorded vote, is that the same as an electronic vote? Because I've always been under the impression that when we had an electronic vote, that was recorded. Yet it's recently come to my attention it wasn't in the minutes.
Just clarify. Sorry, as a recorded vote, the names are recorded in the minutes.
So when we are told there's an electronic vote and then don't ask for a recorded vote, we don't get a recorded vote. Am I correct? That's been happening before. I don't think that's right. Thank you.
Councillor Carr.
Just a quick point of clarification. Do we need to vote on the amendment to go in first, or are we voting on the amended motion?
The amendment, all the motion as amended. It's apparently it's not an amendment, it's additional recommendation. Are we ready to do the vote?
You might want to just clarify, they're now voting for 3 recommendations.
You're now voting for 3 recommendations that were explained to you earlier. Okay? Move to vote. Does it come up on the screen yet? The vote is carried, members. Okay? We move on to item 10, Members' Allowances Scheme. Councillor Harvey.
I'll move the recommendation as on the order paper, Mr Mayor.
Do we have a seconder for the members' allowances? Does anybody want to speak on it? Are you all in favour? Agenda item 11, notion of motion, support for Basingstoke and Dean residents under threat of criminalisation following abortion or pregnancy loss. Councillor Hart, would you propose your motion? You have 5 minutes.
Hello, first time doing that. Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Because this is an emotive issue, I want to be really clear about what this motion is and isn't. It does not seek to change any healthcare rules on abortion or look to change the number of weeks into a pregnancy up to which you can obtain an abortion. Those things would remain exactly the same, governed by current healthcare regulations. This motion asks, firstly, that this council adds its voice to the overwhelming number of expert medical organisations and a majority of the British public in calling on the government via our local MPs and relevant secretaries of state to decriminalise abortion. Some of you have asked me why this national issue is a matter for us. Because until abortion is decriminalised, the 50,000 women and girls of childbearing age in Basingstoke and Dean risk falling foul of criminal investigation or prosecution following pregnancy loss or abortion, as is happening in rapidly growing numbers up and down the country. The government currently refuses to amend the law, so I believe it's up to us and any authority in agreement to add our weight to the debate and send a message to government that the right to choose must be finally and properly enshrined in law, because MPs who have campaigned for change without that backing have not been heard. 50,000 women and girls is over 25% of our borough's population, and it is our job to stand up for them. Secondly, the motion asks that we explore ways that we might support residents caught up in these circumstances in the meantime. Abortion is the only medical procedure governed by law as well as healthcare guidelines. Those of us who support the right to choose agree it is preferable for termination to happen as early as possible. But it is the law that delays access to care and makes it more difficult for vulnerable people to seek. In cases where abortion guidelines have been breached, experts have concluded it's almost always the fear of criminalisation and the uncertainty of not knowing how pregnant you are and the difficulty, especially for abused and vulnerable people, of accessing care that is also governed by law that has prevented people from seeking that care before the 24-week deadline. Simply put, and as the government's Science and Technology Select Committee confirmed, current law causes women to do the very thing that the law is supposed to prevent. Until abortion is decriminalised, it's also at greater risk of being controlled or swayed by the recent rise, here and abroad, of extreme right-wing populism. 3 MPs introduced anti-choice amendments to the last crime bill. Nigel Farage recently said MPs should roll back abortion rights, and a new anti-choice group stood 22 parliamentary candidates last year. Now 6 women have been prosecuted over suspected abortion offences in the last 2 years. Before that, only 3 women were convicted since 1967. Medical providers cite around 60 women under police investigation following abortion and miscarriage since 2018. Before that, there were almost none. And the British Pregnancy Advisory Service reports receiving dozens of police requests for confidential medical records since 2020, including from Hampshire Police. The growing risk to our pregnant residents is evident in these women's stories. Accounts of being held in custody without support following traumatic miscarriage, of having children removed and banned from contact, of digital and forensic searches, and years spent going through this process with lifetime imprisonment hanging over them are truly heartbreaking. I ask only that we look through this with the same lens as we would any other healthcare issue, to consider the care and support we offer to those whose desperate actions also criminalise them, such as rough sleepers who turn to drug use or theft, or people who try to take their own lives before suicide was
You have 1
criminalised. Decriminalised, sorry, thank you. We support those people because we understand that there is no public interest in putting them in a 50 grand a year cell, and vitally because we know locking them up doesn't discourage the thing we want it to, it actually encourages it. That compassion and that rational thought should apply here too. Decriminalisation does not mean deregulation. It means women needing care are far likely to seek it earlier, before the deadline. It means access to that care will be far easier for those in abusive or difficult circumstances, and it means that our residents' right to choose is protected for the future in a landscape that is growing more hostile to it by the day. This motion seeks only to move that case forward and help protect a quarter of our local population in the meantime. Thank you.
That was Councillor Hart's maiden speech, by the way. Councillor Basham, do you wish to second this motion and speak now, or do you wish to reserve the right to speak the motion at a later stage?
I'd like to speak now, please, Mr Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Good evening, members. I decided to second this motion because at first I did not believe that it was necessary. It is. Some months ago, Councillor Hart told me that abortion was technically illegal in the UK. I laughed and told her that she must be mistaken. Women have had proper access to choice in this country since before I was born. With her deep understanding of the issue, she quickly proved me wrong. Until now, I had blithely assumed that this right was established and functioning well in our permissive, secular society. I was a bit shocked that I was wrong. In discussions with several of you beforehand, 3 questions kept coming up. I suspect they're the same questions that are going through your mind right now. First, what is the problem? Doesn't the current system work? Second, why here, in this chamber? Doesn't it belong in Westminster? Finally, why now? Can't it wait? To those of you thinking the current regulations work, women used to travel here across the Irish Sea to seek abortions in the UK. So what is the problem? This motion does not seek to alter or change the current regulatory framework. It does not mention any number of weeks nor the rights of the unborn child because it does not seek to change either of these matters, just to decriminalise what is essentially a healthcare issue. Councillor Hart referred to expert calls for decriminalisation. There's a letter signed by 32 organisations, including the British Medical Association, the Royal Colleges of Obstetricians, Gynaecologists, Midwives, GPs, and 28 other learned and influential institutions. A mix of professionals, professors, let's call them experts, calling for the decriminalisation of abortion. I have 2 daughters. They are both under 16. Imagine if your daughter was the 15-year-old girl investigated by police after a stillbirth at 28 weeks, accused of illegal abortion, her phone and laptop confiscated during her GCSE exams, and endured a year-long investigation, which concluded only when the coroner found that the pregnancy had ended as a result of natural causes. Imagine your daughter being the woman arrested in hospital and kept in a police cell for 36 hours after a stillbirth at 24 weeks. To those of you thinking, what is this issue doing in this chamber? I agree. As a matter of practical healthcare, it belongs in Winchester. And as a matter of decriminalisation, it belongs in Westminster. Unfortunately, neither is properly having this conversation. So it falls to us here to try to make a difference. And the difference we seek with this motion is to ask, what can this council practically do for the women of Basingstoke and Dean? There are 50,000 of them of childbearing age, and 1 in 3 will need access to pregnancy loss healthcare. That is 17,000 women and girls at risk of criminalisation, on top of the personal and familial grief and trauma already associated with miscarriage and abortion. Finally, Why now? I read in the paper a few weeks ago a story about the rise in criminal prosecutions. I called Councillor Hart and said, "You're right, it's happening here, now." Whether that is because of the religious or moral views of police chiefs, local prosecutors, or the growth of telemedicine, I don't think it really matters. The statistics show that we are gradually moving from a very low statistical position of why does this matter to one where it matters much more. There were just 3 criminal convictions since that 1861 Act, but there have been 6 cases in court in the last 2 years. A recent Freedom of Information request shows...
You have 1 minute, Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A recent Freedom of Information request shows there have been at least 4, maybe as 20 criminal investigations in the last 6 years in Hampshire alone. Westminster's own Select Committee invited members of Parliament to consider its conclusions on whether the 1967 Act should be amended, but the government of the day has said that it will not put this matter onto the parliamentary agenda. It will not take the opportunity offered by its police and crime bill. That is sad, it is wrong, and that is why this motion is in this chamber. To be clear, this motion seeks practical support mechanisms for those affected by the criminalisation of abortion in Basingstoke and Deane, and it seeks a bigger conversation in Westminster about decriminalisation. So realistically, what else can this council do, if anything, to help create sanctuary and support for those affected? And importantly, can we apply pressure to Westminster to reconsider? I think the answer is yes. I think we need to ask it now, and I think that we owe a duty to the women of Basingstoke and Deane to ask these questions. Mr. Mayor, I will be voting for this motion. I thank members for listening and encourage them to vote carefully, but with full confidence in the support of all those medical experts.
Thank you. Time's up. We're going to open up to debate. I've got Councillor Minus-Ban.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I want to begin by acknowledging the importance of this motion and the spirit behind it. I hope Councillor Hart understands that she has my full support in believing that this is worth fighting for. For those who access it, abortion is necessary healthcare. It is safe, it is common, and for many, life-changing, and for many others, even life-saving. The fact that it remains under criminal law rather than being treated solely as a healthcare matter is something that should trouble us all. I fully support those affected by the current legal framework and believe we must stand with organisations that provide critical support to those facing prosecution and trauma. However, while I share the desire to see change, I do not believe that allocating this council's budget and officer resources to this issue is the right approach. Abortion legislation is a matter for national government, and the most effective route to real change lies in reform at that level. That is why I will not be voting for it, and it is not a lack of support for the issue. I do support those who are impacted. I believe our efforts are best placed in backing the organisations that are already equipped to support people caught by this legislation. We must also ensure that our resources are used where they can be most effective. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gavin James.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. These subjects are often very emotive, and one of the reasons why there'll be a free vote as far as this group is concerned. I think everyone should vote on their own conscience. From a personal point of view, I will be supporting it. I recognise from what the account that Councillor Hart and Councillor Basham have given that the law is potentially wrong. The problem is I'm not qualified to unpick that law or truly understand what other risks might be opened by unpicking that law. There are clearly people out there who practice abortions illegally. They prey on the vulnerable and strip them of money and cause them much harm. And I wouldn't want anything to put them in a safer place. But whilst agreeing with the motion mover that some people need a lot more protection than the current situation provides. When you look at the motion, it's asking us to hassle our MPs. I'll absolutely do that. The law needs to be reviewed. It does mention advocate for decriminalisation. I want to make sure that decriminalisation is decriminalisation effectively the victim, the person who needs the abortion for whatever reason, but I don't want to decriminalise those who practice illegal abortions. So it's certainly to hassle the MP to make sure they go to Parliament and they start pushing for a debate and a review of the law. So I'll support it on that basis. In terms of what this council do, I don't think the budget is going to be particularly strained. Clearly, there are expert agencies. Following COVID, it's always good to go out and review who's still out there and who's still working, which charities are still operating in our area, and what the capacity they have to support and offer advice. It's clearly there are specialist services out there. I'm sure GPs and I'm sure solicitors will send people to those agencies for support, but actually in times of crisis, quite often it's our door people walk through, and we need to make sure that our receptionists and those who deal with frontline services have the skills to offer, and indeed our community centres have the skills and the knowledge to send people in the right direction. So I think there is worthwhile limited budget of just finding out, doing a bit of research, seeing where the help comes from. So I'll support it in terms of the fact that I think there is something we can do to help those potentially in trouble within our own borough, but also I do think it's quite clear that the law is no longer working and needs to be reviewed.
Councillor West.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Can I first just belatedly declare an interest that I work for Basingstoke's MP directly as a full-time employee, so this regards him, so I should probably declare that. Just want to commend Councillor Hart and Councillor Basham on this motion. I think it's really important, and it also commend them on this being in support of a brilliant Labour woman, Emily Darlington, on the back benches of the Labour government benches, who's pushing for a lot of this in Parliament, and I'm glad to lend my support to that today, and we'll be voting for this motion. It is my understanding, and I hope that Councillor Hart can maybe clarify if she knows on this when she sums up, but it's my understanding that MPs voted to decriminalise in Northern Ireland in 2019, this exact thing, but we've yet to have parity in the rest of the UK, and I think it's really important that we see that if our government saw it fit to decriminalise in Northern Ireland, there's no reason to not do the same here at home. Thank you so much, and I won't say any more on the matter because, as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't affect me.
Thank you. Councillor McCormick.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. I'm inclined to support this motion. I think Councillor Basham's point, most residents would assume that abortion is legal already. And in terms of lobbying our MP, yeah, that's what MPs are there for. So, yeah, more than happy to support.
Are there any more speakers? Councillor Isaac.
Mr Deputy Mayor, I'm afraid the motion doesn't sit terribly well with me. I understand the concerns that the proposers have in relation to the involvement of the criminal law, and I can see that that needs to be looked at. Like Councillor James, I don't know what the answer to it is. But what troubles me is that there's no reference to the rights of the unborn child in this, and I'm not sure that the majority of the people in this country actually support this, from what I've read. And I don't think it's just a question of being a health issue. So, while I understand where you're coming from, I'm afraid that the wording of this is not one that I feel I can support, and I hope you'll understand why.
Councillor Hart, would you like to sum up? Sorry.
I'd just like to ask Councillor Isaac whether you'd be happy for me to ask you about your sex life. Probably not, because I'm not really interested in your sex life, but because it's none of my business. And I find it really outrageous that you think you can come and tell me and my husband whether we should have a child or not and turn it into your own personal opinion. I mean, I think I'd like to start a campaign to make men have vasectomies. How would you like that, to have a criminalised vasectomies? It's none of your business what people do with their sex lives and with their procreation, so you need to butt out.
I think you've made my point for me very well. Thank you.
We're ready to sum up, Councillor Hart.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor, and thank you to members who discussed a tricky subject with sensitivity and gravity. Before I forget, Mr Deputy Mayor, I would like to ask for a recorded vote. I didn't want to leave that to the end because I was probably going to forget. Thank you. to some of your points, I think, thank you to those who have spoken in support of this tonight. In terms of not supporting it because of budgetary reasons, initial exploration of possible help is the ask here. Any potential support, I don't know what that might be, because I'm not a medical expert, nor a legal one. That's kind of the point. But it could be as simple signposting. We don't know that yet. The point is we won't know until we look. It's likely to be a drop in the ocean, as has been pointed out by Councillor James, and then in that case a budget would have to come before this council anyway. So I'm not convinced that it's a good reason to not support something that you claim to support. In terms of the rights of the unborn, I have been very, very clear that this motion does not call for abortion deadlines to be extended. If you, as I do, have concern around unborn rights, then we should agree that the earlier an abortion happens in term, the better. And I've explained how medical experts at all the bodies and organisations that work in this field and the government's Science and Tech Select Committee agree decriminalisation best serves that goal. If the rights of the unborn are what you're concerned about, they've told us what to do about it. In the 18 months since the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade, hundreds more babies have died than expected. Preventable deaths of women are being recorded, and doctors are leaving anti-choice states in droves. It is reassuring to think that that could not happen here, but I think that if you're not worried about the tangible rise of the populist far right in the UK, inside and outside of Westminster, or you think that this isn't top of their shopping list, then perhaps you haven't been paying attention. Make no mistake, the exemptions granted in the 1967 Act is our version of Roe versus Wade, but a so-called right that needs a rubber stamp or freedom from political and public pressure to work properly is not a right. It is a conditionally permitted privilege whose loss would have swift and dreadful consequences. Northern Ireland, a place with deeply held religious beliefs around the sanctity of life, decriminalised abortion 3 years ago following such a consequence. Savita Halapanavar died from sepsis aged 31 after lying in a hospital bed miscarrying for a week. Women must finally and entirely have the legal right to choose. Women deserve to grieve their miscarriages and stillbirths in private, not in a police station. They need the legal reassurance that will get them that necessary care earlier in their pregnancy terms, greatly lessening the risk of late-term abortion and even helping some continue with their pregnancies. Any women in the late-term situations that we all want to prevent, the very, very desperate few, aren't going to be put off by potential jail any more than women 60 years ago were put off by the very real risk of bleeding out in the back room of a pub. I ask simply that we are brave and rational and put aside noise and fear and acknowledge the common sense evidence-based pathway to protecting pregnant people and children, just as Northern Ireland did, just as France and Canada and Australia and New Zealand have. I ask that we help the government to do this by demonstrating our support for that change and putting our collective voice behind the women of Basingstoke and Dean who deserve to have their bodily autonomy enshrined in law once and for all. Thank you.
Members, we'll move to a vote. Is there anybody that hasn't voted that wants to vote? The vote is carried. Let's move on to item 12 on the agenda. Questions from members of the council on notice. We have one question this evening. Councillor West, would you like to ask your question?
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. So just before I get on to the question itself, I will say that I have already had a answer on some of this, but I think it's important to bring it to the Council's attention. At the last meeting of the Human Resources Committee, Labour councils raised concerns about a proposed change to the Council's grievance policy, particularly regarding employees' ability to have a representative present at the early stages of the grievance process. Following that discussion, the committee agreed that Unison, as the Council's recognised trade union, would be consulted and that the proposed change would be dropped if Unison opposed it. It was also agreed that while minor amendments to HR policies could be made by the HR management team, any major changes would be brought back to the committee. Following this meeting, I would like to understand what engagement has taken place with Unison since that meeting, whether the Council has fully accepted the position of Unison reps on the proposed grievance policy change, and whether Unison suggested any further changes to the Council's HR policies, and if so, whether those changes are considered minor or major under the terms agreed by the committee. Thank you.
Councillor Harvey, would you like to respond? You've got 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. As the portfolio holder, I will respond, but I will start, because I should and I realise I now need to, declare an interest because I am a member of Unison. So I will declare that for the record. Thank you for the question, Councillor Weston, highlighting an important point to clarify our position in supporting staff. Council, as an employer, has an open and constructive relationship with Unison as the Council's recognised trade union and engages with them on a regular basis through both informal and formal meetings to enable discussion on key matters affecting staff. Two policies were presented at the HR committee, the grievance policy and the procedure and disability and accessibility policy and procedure. The Council has fully accepted the position of the Unison reps on the specific proposed grievance policy change discussed at the HR committee. This makes it clear that staff can have representation from the early informal stages of the grievance procedure. Since the HR committee, Unison reps have met with senior council officers their 2 monthly meeting and discussed the general approach in policy and review. Unison reps have also met with the head of HR in an informal meeting and discussed the specific clause discussed at the HR committee, and Unison set out their preferred wording, which has been accepted by the council. Unison representatives subsequently on Friday last week confirmed via email that they have no further requested comments to make on either policy and were content with the minor changes that have thus been proposed.
Thank you. No further comment.
Councillor West, do you have a supplementary? Agenda item 13, questions to the Chair of Cabinet or Committee. I believe there is a question on the audit and account minutes. Sorry, Councillor Katacha.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I would like to ask the Chair of Audits and Accounts to give us an update from our last meeting regarding the discussions we've had. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Thank you for your question, Councillor Katacha. It's actually the question of the whole committee. This council delegates responsibility for the approval of its financial statements to the Audit and Accounts Committee, of which I am chair. The 2024 accounts were approved for issue at our meeting in February. However, committee asked me to draw council's attention to the fact that this is the second year running where we have had to do so with a disclaimed audit opinion, and the likelihood is of further disclaimed audit opinions in 2025 and possibly 2026. Our 2022-23 audit opinion was disclaimed under government legislation, commonly referred to as the backstop legislation. 2023 was the reset year, designed to reset the audit backlog across the country. You may recall that Councillor Isaac asked a question of Councillor James about this in December. At that time, Councillor James said that it may have repercussions for future audits. He was correct. Because the accounts contain numbers brought forward from previous years, we are now in what is termed the recovery period, while we rebuild assurance. Official guidance issued by the regulator, the Financial Reporting Council, sets out that we are likely to have disclaimed audit opinions again in 2025-26. This is an unfortunate situation, not of our making, that has placed members on Audit Committee into a difficult position to approve and sign our accounts in the absence of an unqualified external audit opinion. it is commendable the strength of our finance team and our Section 151 officer that helped members to make that approval. More details are in the meeting minutes and on the council website, but if you have follow-up questions, with the Mayor's permission, I may be able to answer those now, or I'm happy to do so by email afterwards. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Deputy Mayor.
I think Councillor Kotecha gets the benefit of the supplementary. There is none. Any more questions relating to the minutes of meetings? Well, if that's the case, it's 8:40 and I declare the meeting closed.